All right, here we go. Okay, I think we're live. I am live here with Carlos. I'm very excited to have him on as a guest. He is a psych professional uh, by day and a DJ by night. And we're going to talk about, or he's going to talk about some of the, you work with kids, right?
Yeah, I sure do. Yeah, thank you,
He's
Jeff.
you're going to talk about some of the work you do with kids, and particularly around using music as well for like CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And I'll let you talk about that. But first, if you want, you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe your background, and then we can jump into the mental health stuff.
Awesome, dude. Thank you, Jeff. First of all, thank you, Jeff and I. We met on a Facebook men's mental health group, and we have been able to engage in some pretty good conversations. During in that group, and we were like in a book club through there also, and I really appreciated the time and the energy in those spaces where we were able to talk, and a lot of folks in there were also mental health professionals and or consumers. So it was really cool to kind of find that group. And then through that, Jeff and I met. So yeah, a little bit about me. Let's see. Okay, so currently I live in Ventura, California, and I work in one of the county hospitals here, and I work in the adolescent psychiatric ward, and
Oh,
I'm a clinician there. And so primarily my responsibilities are I meet with the kids when they first get there, and I interview them, and I do a psychosocial assessment. I do a what's called a PHQ-9, which kind of rates their kind of where they're at as far as intent for self-harm and suicidal ideation and or homicidal ideation. We do a wellness forum, and then I also assist with the treatment team with creating the master treatment plan, which is how we're gonna support them while they're in the hospital. So these are kids who um, have tried to hurt themselves or have hurt themselves, have had suicidal ideation, tried to kill themselves. Some of them have homicidal thoughts, not like, oh, I want to kill you, but like literally like a thought with a plan. And or the other big one is kids who maybe are struggling with alteration in reality testing. Maybe they're hearing voices,
mhm.
they're having hallucinations, they're seeing things that aren't there. The big one is hearing commanding voices that are maybe telling them to hurt themselves or hurt other people. Um, so when they first get there, I meet with them and I interview them. So that's what I do, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment. So as far as my background, I've been at this hospital for about 9 months now. Before that, I was a county CPS social worker for Ventura County. And I did that for almost 7 years, and I worked in the emergency response department. So we were the kind of the tip of the spear. We're the ones who, when somebody makes a report, we're the ones who show up and knock on someone's door and say, "Hi, I'm from the government, and I'm here to
Oh,
help." And someone said you're abusing your kids, something like that. That wasn't quite the way we said it. But yeah, and we would interview folks and talk to them, and I think that was good work. I think unfortunately that social workers kind of get a bad rep. If you watch any movie or anything that shows a social worker, they're always disheveled and they look kind of wrinkled up, and they're wearing very sensible shoes and they've got files that are falling and the glasses are all smudged and they seem to be inept. Or they're just evil kind of Cruella de Vil's that just want to snatch kids away from their families. And that's really not what we do. Social workers, like, at least the ones I worked with, these are people that really care about kids, man. And we want to help families, and we want to try to help keep them intact, and we want to connect them to resources so that hopefully they can sustain themselves and stay together, but also stay safe. And so a lot of times we were able to help families identify kind of what the issues are and support them and get them connected to what they need. And sometimes, unfortunately, if there's extenuating circumstances, if there's maybe extensive mental health issues, if there's substance abuse issues, or if there's just real abuse or neglect, then the last option is to detain children and remove them from the parents' care. And that might be going to other family members. That might be going into a residential treatment facility, a group home, what have you. But that was always the last option. I really considered it an honor to have that job, and I really considered it important to really try to advocate for my community and for the people that I worked with, because the statistics aren't great. They show that a lot of kids that go into the system they don't have positive outcomes. They'll stay in the system. The issues that the family is struggling with now are compounded because now they also have social workers and judges and other people, and there's more things that are commanding their attention, and a lot of folks just aren't able to do it, and so if we can help these families and connect them to resources and keep them intact and at home, that was always my first goal. And so I had the honor of doing that for just about 7 years, and before that I worked as a paraprofessional for a program called Wraparound, and we did that here. Wraparound's a nationwide philosophy ideal, and I've met a lot of people doing wraparound. I did it for 9 years at Casa Pacifica, which is here in Camarillo, and they have a residential treatment center where kids live. They have a non-public school, and they have community-based services like wraparound. Well, they don't have it anymore, but they did. They were the holders of the county contract at the time, TBS, and then also some parenting services where parents would come and do kind of play therapy with their kids in this room with like a one-way glass, and there would be parent professionals and therapists kind of behind the glass, and the parents would be plugged in with earphones, and then the folks behind the glass would kind of be coaching them on how to kind of engage with their child, And so we did all that, and I did that for about 9 years, and that was great work. And with Wraparound,
can you talk a little bit about what Wraparound is?
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. Wraparound, it's pretty amazing. It's been around for a minute, and I did it for 10 years because I did it there, and I did it for 1 year in LA County at a place called Vista Del Mar, and they were like Casa Pacifica, but for like the Mar Vista area, where they had a facility where kids lived. They had a school, and they had community-based services. So Wraparound is let me make sure I get this right. They're a multidisciplinary team, and we get referred in by county partners, and that could be typically it's CFS social workers referring a family in that has an open and an ongoing CPS case. It can also be probation officers, the foster system. Referrals could come in through the Department of Mental Health, and they could also come in through IEPs, which is a school district. And IEPs are individualized education plans. So these are programs for kids who are, due to their behaviors, they're not doing well in school. And so the families will ask for an assessment, and they'll get an assessment if there's any learning disabilities and if there's any mental health disabilities. And if they are, then they're offered resources. And something that they can do is maybe get a referral for wraparound services. So we always come in when the kids are maybe at risk of losing placement. So that's a fancy way of saying their behaviors could result in them being placed outside of their home. And so we would come in, and the team consists of a facilitator, which is a graduate level person who really is kind of the leader of the group, for lack of a better word. They're the ones who run the meetings. They're the ones who coordinate all the communication with the referring party. And then you have a child and family specialist, and in different counties and different states are called different things, but this person works directly with the youth. Usually they're a little bit younger. A lot of times I don't want to say fresh out of undergrad, but they're pretty young. And I think one of the things that I've noticed in the couple agencies I worked at, they're typically young, and they look very young. They got baby faces, but they got degrees and they've got experience. But they'll walk around and they'll come in and they'll be wearing a band shirt like the shirt that one of the kids is wearing, and they're wearing the shoes and they know the language, and they're able to kind of connect in this kind of big brother, big sister kind of mentor way. And then you have the paraprofessional or the parent partner, which is what I did. And I would work with the parents or the caregivers directly. And so what the wraparound team would do is we meet with the family once a week. We identify kind of what's going on. We talk about goals. We talk about expectations. And then individually, I might meet with the parents once or twice a week, and the specialist would meet with the kid a couple times a week. And what we're doing individually is we're working on building rapport and trust. And then we're working on kind of whatever these goals are. So maybe the goal is, Johnny is very disrespectful and he's always cursing at me, and I really don't like that. And I'd like some help with that. And it's like, okay, and so maybe the specialist is going out, they go out and get some yogurt, or they go throw a football at the park, and they're talking and they're building rapport. And then the worker might be like, so Johnny, what happened last week? Oh, I got mad and I cussed out my mom and she suspended me. And then maybe the worker might be like, well, what do you think? How do you think you'd feel if somebody talk to you like that, or what have you, and then hopefully as they build trust, maybe the youth can listen and kind of take in some of this information and start kind of adjusting behaviors. I would do the same thing with the parents, but it might be like this. So, as I'm building the trust, I'm walking a tightrope, because parents are very defensive when it comes to you maybe saying something about their parenting, right? And as a parent, I understand that. So first I have to build trust and rapport. Then I've got to kind of be very delicate in how I address stuff. And I might be like, well, Mr. Smith, I know that you're upset, Johnny, the language he uses. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, well, yeah, I noticed the other day I was there and you got upset and you were using kind of colorful language. Um, Maybe he's copying some of your behaviors. What do you think about that? But again, we've got to get to a point where we've got that trust where he's going to hear me and not just kick me out of his house, right? And so I'm working on I don't come in like I'm this professional, I'm this know-it-all. I come in as a parent who one of our guidelines in wraparound was they would like to hire parents who were either consumers of wraparound who had graduated or who were parents of children with special needs. And I'm a parent of a now adult, but he was a child with special needs. And so I'm connected to that. I've got life experience. And instead of me being, you should do this, all the books say you should do that. I would be like, hey, when my kid was kind of doing this is what we tried. What do you think? I've heard about this. What do you think? And so you got to be very careful and you got to be very kind of diplomatic, right? And I really kind of honed my skills as far as being able to talk to people and being respectful and being nurturing. And wraparound's all about family voice and choice. And it's about being strength-based. And it's about listening to the family and kind of meeting them where they're at. We used to have, out here in Ventura County, we have a really high population of migrant workers that follow and they work in the fields. And I had a family that the mom and dad worked in the fields and they were kind of split shifts so somebody could be home with the kids. And the only time they could meet was at 6 o'clock in the morning. And they lived about an hour away from me. And so my team would go out once a week and we would, I'm leaving my house at 4:30 to go to the panaderia and pick up some sweetbreads. And then the family would make coffee and we'd sit there at 6 o'clock in the morning and the kid would walk out with her blanket over her head, like all upset. We would have the meeting at 6 a.m. And likewise, other families, maybe we're meeting at 8 or 9 o'clock on a Saturday. We're really trying to meet them where they're at. So wraparound, I can't say enough about it. I'm sure a lot of your consumers know about it. It sounds like you knew a little bit about it, but it really has informed my practice moving forward. And as a social worker, I carry that with me. And now as a clinician, I carry that with me. And so it's a lot of really, really good work. And it's really interesting because I really find like all these things have kind of come together and put me where I'm at now and put me in the place where I can kind of take some of these experiences, right? And be able to kind of work with these kids. Anyway, so let's see. So before I get into kind of what we do at the hospital, I'm sorry, Jeff, do you have a question? You're about to ask.
That's what I was going to. You keep anticipating my questions, so I should just let you talk.
I carry on a little bit when I get excited. I'm super excited. So please feel free to jump in if I'm missing something or if I'm going on a tangent. So the other thing, if you guys see behind me, I've got a whole bunch of records and stuff. I'm also a DJ, a disc jockey. I am 53 and I started DJing at the age of 13. I was in junior high school. I lived in Pomona, California, which is it's just past LA County, going east, going inland. And we lived out there and a friend of mine, we were in junior high and somebody gave us a flyer. It was summertime. They gave us a flyer for an all ages club. And we were like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And I would ask my dad, hey, can we go? And he goes, yeah, you can go, but you got to do this chore and this chore and that chore and that chore. Yeah, we had a big parcel of land. We had a lot of property. And I'm like, okay. And me and my buddy, man, we knocked all this stuff out and then we got to go. And then it was really interesting. We go to this club and it's all kids and it's all like junior high and like freshmen. It's not kids with cars, it's younger kids, and there's a bunch of kids there. And we paid full price to get in. I'm sure it was $10 or $15, which would have been a lot of money back then.
Oh, yeah.
And we get inside, and it was a club. It was a legitimate club. But what they did, genius. What they did was they locked up all the booze, but the bar was open, and you could buy virgin screwdrivers. So if you know anything about bar drinks, a screwdriver is it's
orange juice,
vodka and orange juice and ice. So a virgin screwdriver is oranges and ice. And I'm sure I paid $5 or $6 for it, which would have been a lot of money. And I remember I bought one drink. I bought one drink, and it was in a real skinny ass glass. And I nursed that thing the whole time, and I'm chewing on the ice, but I was cool. Man. I'm in a club, and I got my little drink, and I'm feeling really sophisticated. We're walking around, and we're walking through the club, and there's girls there and guys there, and we're checking everything out. Really exciting. And we walk into this room, and I hear the bass first hitting. And it's Run DMC. Run DMC was the first cassette that I ever bought.
1986.
So, well, okay.
You know about Raising Hell?
The dates are wrong, unless it was an earlier one. Well, the way I remember it anyway is that I walk in, this bass is hitting, and the DJ is triple threading and he's mixing and he's spinning around. He's doing stuff with his elbow. And he's a B-boy, man. He had like an Adidas or a Puma jumpsuit on, and he had the hat and he had the glasses and he had the gold chain. And I mean, this dude was all swag. And he was doing his thing, and the whole place was just going crazy, man. It was and it just blew my mind. I walked in, I was like, wow. And everything he did, he was controlling everybody like they were all on strings, like they were just his little puppets, you know. It was really, I mean, I wish I remember this guy's name. I just remembered how impressed I was. And I'm like, I want to do that. I want to be that guy, you know. And I went home and I started begging my mom. And my mom always backed me up, man. And my mom went out and she bought me some Technics 1200s, which are the turntables. Even to this day, they're the standard. They're the turntables that everybody uses, because for DJs, you need to have a direct drive turntable and you need to have a slip mat so you can kind of do the thing. You ever see the DJs where they kind of spin the record back? That's because the mat on there allows it. And then there's something called a pitch control. And what that is music. And you might know this, Jeff, but for the audience, music goes by like a beats per minute, BPMs, right? So a really fast song might be 130 beats per minute, which is like boom, 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 boom. A slow song might be So the ideal is you want to match the beats from this song to that song. You want to match them up so that you can seamlessly mix from one song to the next and keep going and keep people on the dance floor. If you play a song and let it end, then people walk away. And then you play the next song and let it end, people walk away. But when you're able to kind of build something, and if you're able to really kind of do it with the wikis and all that and show a little artistry, people get excited. And so I bought my first set of turntables at 13. I've been DJing forever. I've done backyard parties. I've done skating rinks. In like 89, 90, I was on the radio on K-Day, which was it was the first hip hop station on the West Coast. They broadcast off of an AM station, 1580. And we would do live shows from a club in downtown LA. We would have recording artists and big people. We had NWA. You know, you might have heard of them. We had Eric B. and Rakim. We had JJ Fad. Whole bunch of groups. It was a really good time. And we're on the radio, and I'm mixing on the radio, and then I just kept doing it, but in different incarnations. You know, in the 2000s, early 2000s, I would do it, but I kind of got locked in and started doing a lot of weddings and quinceañeras and bar mitzvahs, you know, corporate stuff, which was great, and the money was excellent. But I did that for a while, and then I kind of was feeling like I didn't like it because it felt like work, because I was kind of more of a jukebox, and I was losing kind of the artistry of what I enjoyed doing. And even though the money was really, really good, it was missing some passion, you know. And then I kind of backed off of it a little bit. And then I went to graduate school, and this would have been not too long ago, you know, less than 10 years ago. I went to graduate school, and the program that I went to was a 3-year program, and it was every Saturday from 8 to 6. Wow. So if you know anything about a wedding or a DJ, a wedding or a quinceañera, whatever, all those things happen on Saturdays, you know? So I was already kind of waning with the DJing stuff. And then that was kind of like, well, yeah, I guess I'm going to go to school. And so I semi-retired. People would call me and they'd be like, hey, you did my wedding. We want you to, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I retired. And I would refer them to other people. And I still kept all my equipment. I kept all my records. And every now and then I'd bring everything out for like a family party or whatever. But I stopped doing gigs like that much, and I just focused on school. I stand by that decision. I think it was a good call. And then when COVID hit, I was starting to kind of get back into it. And I've got a buddy who got me a residency, and what that is like you're at this club every week, you know, and he would play and I would play, and we'd have like live bands, and it was a good time. And we did that for a while. And then COVID hit and everything shut down. And when everything shut down, there were a lot of times where people would come up to me and meet me, and then they'd be like, hey, we want to book you for something. I'm like, okay. And like, yeah, what's your Pandora? What's your Mixcloud? What's your YouTube? And I had nothing. I'm just like a dinosaur, right? I'm like, I didn't even have a web page, you know. And they were just like, and younger people would be like, nah. And other people would be like, well, I've heard you. I know you're good. And if they talk to me, if I could have an interview with them, I'd lock it down, because I've done millions of weddings, right? So I've got a lot of experience. But the young people just weren't feeling it. And so when COVID hit, I went through a divorce, and I was able to, it was fairly amicable, as amicable as divorce as can be. And I was able to pull out some equity, and that was part of kind of the divorce agreement. And I was able to keep my house. I refinanced and kept my house. And so I'm going through the divorce and I'm feeling, some kind of feeling that I have as a 40 something year old who's going through my second divorce, right? And I'm by myself. My kids have moved out. Oh, excuse me. Feeling kind of like a loser. And I'm in my house alone and I'm thinking, I've never, since I was a teenager, I've never had a DJ room. I've never had a space where I could walk in and just, when I was a kid, I did it all the time. But then, I got my soon to be wife at the time pregnant at 18 and was having kids and families and working and all that stuff. And all that time I was DJing, I would go do a gig and then I would come home and take all my stuff and just stick in a corner in the garage until the next gig and repeat and repeat and repeat. And that was part of me losing the passion because I wasn't able to do it for fun. It was just doing it to get paid. And so I'm going through this kind of whatever this crisis is. And I thought, I've never had a DJ room. I want a DJ room. And I looked at one of my bedrooms just full of junk, right? I thought this is going to be my room. And so I pulled everything out and I took all my records and went through them and organized them. And then a friend of mine was moving and his wife had one of these bookshelves, these IKEA bookshelves, right? And they're 12 by 12. So they're perfect for records because records are 12 inches, right? Mm-hmm. And they were moving and they were going to get rid of it or something. And so I'm like, I'll buy it from you. And I bought that and brought it home. And I'm a little OCD-ish. So then when I got one, I'm like, oh, I need another one. I need another one. I need another one. And I got to fill it in. Oh my God, I'm missing this record. I'm missing that. And I just started filling in. And if you see, I'll pan around here a little bit so you guys get some kind of idea. It's a six. I have.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know how many records I have, but there's thousands. I've been collecting.
Is that all from like
83
from the 80s on? Like some of your original?
Yeah, a lot of it is stuff I purchased when it came out. Wow. A lot of it is stuff now, again, that I'm filling in. Like, I'm like, I used to have this record. What happened to it? And I'll go on eBay or whatever. I like to go digging, which is, you go to record stores and you go to swap meets and you go to estate sales and you dig and you look and, maybe you find some stuff. I don't buy records to keep them in a saran wrap, and shiny and try to sell them and think I'm going to make $1 million off of. I buy records to enjoy and to play. And I play them, but I take care of them, So I made this room. And then I actually set it up where I can come in here and I can push one button and everything turns on my little disco lights or whatever, my turntable. Oh. And then I can play music. And as a social worker at the time, I had some really tough, there were some really gnarly days, because you see some stuff, and I would come home sometimes and just be so deflated and so heartbroken with some of the stuff I'd seen, with some of the stuff some of these kids are going through, some of these families are going through. And I would come home just really sad. And what I found that really, really helps me, I kind of forgotten this, but what I found that really helps me is just listening to music. So I would come home and I walk into my little special room and I would hit one button, everything turns on, and I've got all my records organized. I'd be like, I think I want to listen to some Rolling Stones right now. And boom, I know right where the record's at. I pull it out, I put it on the platter, I let it play. Maybe I want to hear some AC/DC. Maybe I want to hear some Hall & Oates. I don't know. Maybe I want to mix. I could do that too, or I could just put it down. And a record sounds different than, like a digital, like an MP3. An MP3 is compressed and it's crisp and it's really tight and it sounds awesome, but a record sounds warm. And I don't really know how to explain it. A lot of people, if you haven't played records, maybe when you were younger or now, you may not know what I'm talking about, but it's a different experience. When I was a kid, you buy a record, you bring it home. It's in this plastic and you kind of do this thing on your jeans to kind of release the plastic. And then you open it up and you take it out and you look at it like, wow. And you put it down and then you take the sleeve and it might have the lyrics. It might have some artwork. There might be a poster in there and you're just checking this out. This is like a thing that's in your hand, man. It's cool, and I know even with my kids, who I taught all my kids to be DJs, and it was a family business for a long time, and they had appreciation. But my kids were like, I could just buy that on iTunes. I could just get that in my pen. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not something you hold, It's like, for me, it's like, I like the tactile part of it, Be that as it may. What I found during that time is there was a lot of times where I could come home and I could just put on music and listen to it. And I found that it helped me and it elevated my mood. But I kind of thought, well, that's because I've been a DJ my whole life. I've been in music my whole life. And I've been able to hold on to that, right? And I kind of thought it was just, I wouldn't say just my experience, but I didn't think of it as something clinical or whatever. And then when I started, after I graduated and got my master's degree, I've been working on my clinical hours, right? You got to do 3,000 hours. You got to take an ethics exam, which I've already taken, and you've got to get clinical experience, right? And so the job I have now, I'm really blessed because what I do is I work with kids, and these are kids that are these are some sad kids. These are kids that have been through a lot. They've seen a lot. They've experienced a lot. And these are kids who literally have gotten to a point in their lives where they have made an attempt to hurt themselves or to just take themselves off the chessboard. And that's just so profound. I mean, I can't even explain what that's like. And our job is to try to help them, and really we have these psychoeducation groups that we do at the hospital. And best case scenario, what we really shoot for is try to do 2 of those a day. But I work in a psych ward, and sometimes somebody else is in mental distress, and we've got to respond to that. We got to support different people. We might have just a flurry of people coming in, and we've got to do all the interviewing and all the stuff, all the legal stuff that that the hospital
Mhm.
needs for compliance needs and what have you, and for billing. But best case scenario is we're able to do these psychoeducation groups, and in these groups, we have very specific goals. The goals are, number one, to kind of help the kids identify what are their triggers, right? So Jeff, I'm sure you know what a trigger is, but for the uninformed, for anybody who's listening, a trigger could be something that happens and it creates some kind of feeling inside of you, which might lead to an emotional reaction, which might lead to a physical reaction, right? So in the case of these kids, they get triggered, they start feeling sad or mad or angry, and then maybe they engage in self-harm or something else, right? And so in these groups, we really kind of explore what are triggers, what does that feel like, what are the somatic symptoms, what are the physical things that are going on in your body when you're triggered. Is your heart beating out of your chest? Does your stomach feel like it's completely knotted up? Are you having racing thoughts that you just can't break away from? Are you having a cold sweat? Is your breathing shallow? Are you having a hard time breathing? Are your muscles all tensed up? What's happening, right? And so we work on that with the kids, and then we work on coping skills, right? Positive coping skills. And so the modality that I really like is CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy. I've done some research on it. I'm still very much a novice in this, and I from school and from what I read, and honestly, I'll be honest with you, from my social media algorithm, I follow a lot of people that are in mental health, and I borrow stuff, and I try to do my research, and I try to read, and I'm just really, really hungry about the knowledge. And so I want to really preface this and say that no idea is original. I'm not taking credit for any of this. I'm just saying that I was able to put some of it together along with my life experience and say that I feel like that there is empirical peer-reviewed evidence, right? That shows there's science that shows that when you do these things, certain things happen in your body that can help combat anxiety or depression or whatever, right? And they can maybe give you enough of an adjustment or a regulation that maybe, if you're feeling really, really bad and then you listen to music, maybe you feel just a little bit better, and maybe that's enough for you not to engage in self-harm, you know? So I want to be sure that I preface that, because again, this isn't my idea. It's just stuff that I've kind of picked out and found. And so one of the big ones, one of the really popular ones that we do with kids is I call it music therapy, for lack of a better word, right? And so what it is I've found through like reading and different stuff, again, a lot of other researchers have kind of done the legwork, that music music can be very transformative.
Mhm.
Music can work in a lot of ways. You might listen to a song and it might elicit a memory. Hopefully it's a good memory, right? The example I give my kids is like, if I put on this particular band, there's a band called Sonora Dinamita, and they've been around since like the 40s. And there's different variations of the group because as they've changed, maybe they replaced the trumpet with a new trumpet guy, the lead singer, but it's been the same band. And they're basically kind of like, I want to be respectful of the band because I love the band. They're from Colombia. My family's Colombian, and they've always been kind of a soundtrack in my life, right?
Oh.
But they are a staple. And what they did, even when they started, is they would play songs from the 20s and the 30s, but they kind of hipped them up a little bit, made them more modern, And these are, if you go to, especially here in Los Angeles, if you go to a wedding or something, you're going to hear these songs, and everybody knows these songs. And so my example I give the kids is like, let's say you hear a song by this band, right? And maybe what you think about is you're like, oh, I remember when I was a kid, my mom would be up at the crack of dawn on a Saturday morning and she's blasting this music, and you can smell the chilies cooking because she's cooking the chilies in the kitchen, and it's like that acid comes up and it burns your eyes, and you could smell the fabuloso. And fabuloso is a cleaning agent that I think it's made in Mexico, and it's very powerful. and is very popular with Mexican American families. And so it's something, if when I say that reference, people kind of go, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about, right? And so I'm like, so you hear the song and you remember your mom, and you remember being a kid, and you remember Saturday morning, and you remember getting up and not being happy about getting up, but you got up anyway, you did your chores, and then maybe you got to sit in front of the TV with a big ass bowl of cereal and watch Bugs Bunny or something, right?
Yeah.
There's a memory, maybe it's warm, and maybe that makes you feel something. Or maybe, your family would go camping every summer, and your dad's favorite band was fill in the blank, Elvis, and he would play Elvis. And now when you hear Elvis, you think about your dad, and you think about camping trips and s'mores and all that stuff, and it elicits some kind of a memory, right? A good one. The flip side of that is maybe you hear a song and you're like, oh wow, I remember this song was all over the place when I was dating that girl, that boy. Wow, I was so in love. Oh, hold on, they cheated on me with my best friend. I don't like the way that feels. I don't like this song, right? So again, very quickly, you go from the song kind of elating you to maybe it bringing you back down, right? So that happens. The other thing that can happen with music is maybe the lyrics. Maybe the guy's singing about how he's done so much and he's tried so hard and everything he does just fails. And you're like, oh man, that sounds like me. Wow. This guy is writing my story. He sounds just like me. This sounds like my last relationship. This sounds like my boss who won't give me a break no matter how hard I try, right? And some kind of way the lyrics kind of resonate with you. And a lot of times when we are struggling and we are kind of in the pits of it, right? And you're just dealing with it, you feel so alone and so isolated. You feel like such a loser, right? You feel like you're the only one who's experiencing this. And when you hear somebody else share that experience, you're like, oh, it ain't just me. Wow. And then you don't feel quite so alone. And maybe this person's doing better. Maybe you're like, oh, well, they're doing all right. Maybe that means I'm going to do all right. Maybe that gives you hope, right? That's the power of the dynamics of group. When you go to a group setting, right, and you've got a bunch of people and they're talking, you might go into that group and be like, I'm not going to talk. The judge made me come. I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to sign my thing at the end of the day. But maybe you hear something, you're like, oh wow, this person went through that. This person went there, and then something happens and it's powerful, right? So with music, if you hear some lyrics that resonate you, the same thing could happen. And even though it might elicit kind of a sad memory, maybe it also kind of gives you hope, and it gives you a strength of power and empowerment, right? The other thing could be not a memory, and it could be not the lyrics. It could just be the production of the music. It could be that cool little guitar riff that Eddie Van Halen does at the beginning of Thriller, right? It could be a really cool horn that they do in the song, or it could be a really cool drum solo that kind of pumps you up. In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins, there's about halfway through the song with
oh yeah,
and everybody goes, yeah, right? That pumps me up, and I think it pumps up a lot of people, right? So it could be that. There's a style of music now that, again, I'm an old guy, but it was really, really big, and I think it's still around, called EDM, which is electronic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And EDM does not have a lot of lyrics. There's some, but it hardly ever. It's really about the production of the music. And if you've ever been to a festival or a concert or even a club, even a backyard, and the DJ's doing their thing, there'll be a song, and it's masterful the way they produce it, because a song will kind of build and build and build, and the crowd feels it, right? And it's building and it's building, and then it hits a crescendo, and then the bass drops. Boom, and everybody just goes nuts, man. And it's like you're all like one living organism, and everybody reacts to it. It's like being in a mosh pit where everybody's kind of moving together and you feel like you're part of this living thing. It's very, very powerful. And so sometimes the production of the music can be what gets you, right? Okay. So those are a couple examples. Those are the ones that I use with the kids. And so what I do in our groups is I'm kind of storytelling. That's my style. I don't want to come across as like the old guy, and I don't want to be boring, because I was a horrible high school student. I was like, again, I was already DJing, so I would just show up and kind of pass out flyers to whatever I was doing and then take off. And I'd come into class like once every whatever. Yeah. And the teacher didn't like me because they thought I was a lost cause. Like, I guess I was. I think that's a fair statement. But they had a lot of disdain for me, and they were very open with how they felt about me. They would try to embarrass me, and I would respond, And so it wasn't a great experience. And I acknowledged that I was kind of you know, maybe I earned some of that. I don't know. But the other piece of it is these teachers, none of them ever took the time to try to kind of reach me and connect to me, you know? And so me sitting in a history class where they're talking about a bunch of old dead white guys with wigs on, I didn't feel compelled to know about that. And I didn't understand why that mattered to me. And it wasn't until junior college, years and years later, where I found a teacher that talked. I think he introduced me to Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, where he talked about not just all the rah-rah stuff that we get taught in grade school about how great America is, but the fact that America was was built on the slave trade, the Chinese building the railroads, and all these different things. And it was like, oh, that's really interesting, And this person was able to kind of spark something in me and have kind of a love for knowledge and for learning. So I never had that in high school. And so when I have my groups, I joke, I goof, I use myself a lot as examples because I've made a million mistakes, as a young person. And I hope that if I talk about the dumb stuff I did when I was a kid, it also gives them hope because they look at me like, oh, he's kind of squared away now. Look at him. He's doing well, And I do all that. But the main thing I do is I'm very respectful with these kids, When I first meet them, I'll tell them, I'm like, have you ever been in a room where all the adults are talking about you like you're not there? And to a kid, they're like, yeah, I fucking hate that. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that to you. I'm going to treat you like a patient, and I'm going to treat you with the, with the respect that you deserve as an individual. And my job is to help you learn about your mental health and to give you the tools that you need maybe to do better. And I'm not going to talk down to you. I'm not going to patronize you. We're just going to be human beings, and we're going to talk, And every time I tell the kids that, they just kind of look at me like, huh? And then we have our groups and we talk, and it's an actual dialogue. We're back and forth and we're talking about stuff. And then I try to make it, again, I want it to be compelling. I want it to be fun. I want it to be something they can engage in. So when I talk about music therapy, I talk about how the music works in the brain and how it can help you to kind of battle anxiety and depression, and how these memories can maybe be good memories, right? But how you got to be careful because you can also bring up bad memories. And maybe sometimes that's okay. Maybe you have a breakup. I know I've done this. You have a breakup, and then afterwards you just have a little pity party. You just play sad songs for a couple of days. You let yourself.
I did that.
Purge that, and that's okay. Grieving is okay. You're grieving the end of a relationship or something. That's fine, but hopefully you don't get stuck there, right? So being able to listen to music, it's just so powerful. And again, it's something that I've known my whole life because again, I have DJ'd a million clubs and weddings and parties, and being able to celebrate with people with music and with food, it's amazing because you're looking around and you're seeing how happy people are as they're celebrating whatever this thing is. And music is kind of one of the catalysts for that. And I just think that's amazing. And so I'll do this with the kids, and I'll tell them, I'll give them all the science, and then I'll ask them to pick a song. And then of course we have rules, and I tell them, we got to be cool with the songs we pick. Number one, it cannot be a song that glamorizes or glorifies violence. It can't be a song about self-harm. It can't be a song about suicidal stuff. It can't be a Quentin Tarantino movie, where every word is F this and F that. If kids curse, they'll curse and they get no reaction from me because I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. Because they're used to doing that and getting a reaction from a teacher. They're clutching their pearls. Oh my God, go to the principal's office. I don't do that. I just don't react to it. And then it goes away because they're like, oh, there was no payoff. But I tell them for the song, it can't be a song that's doing all that. It can't be a song that's sexually explicit. There was a song that came out a couple years ago now, and the initials are WAP. And I'll let you Google it.
Cardi B, right?
I think so. And I want to say too, I have turned into the old man on the porch. You kids, get off my grass. I have kind of turned into that guy when it comes to music, but I don't really dig in because my generation, we grew up with NWA, we grew up with the 2 Live Crew, we grew up with Little Kim. I mean, and if I was on this soapbox about sexually explicit music and I had a kid who was kind of hip and they came back and threw this in my face, I'd have to admit that a lot of that stuff's on my playlist. It's just more that I don't listen to terrestrial radio. It just doesn't resonate with me. And I leave it at that, and I don't play it. I don't take those kind of gigs anymore, but I understand that's kind of young people music. Like my music, my parents didn't like. And I remember I read somewhere that, when the Beatles hit LA, when the Beatles hit the United States, there was a big uproar because the public was like, oh my God, they're going to corrupt our children. Elvis, when he was on the Ed Sullivan show, he had to agree not to do the thing with the hips, and he wouldn't agree to it. So they had to make sure that when they filmed him, and you can Google this, when they filmed him, it was from like the belly button up, because that was way too sexual. Him doing the thing with the hips is going to corrupt all of our youth, right? So it's always been this thing where the older generation goes, that music's bad. So I'm not saying that, but what I tell the kids is, we've just got to be kind of cool, and so pick a song, but I'm going to play it, but I'm also looking at the lyrics, right? And I reserve the right to not play a song. I reserve the right to stop a song if I feel it's inappropriate. And the other thing I'm doing as a facilitator and as a therapist is I'm watching the room, and I'm looking around, and if somebody starts to get triggered, and it may not have anything to do with, the song may not be a bad song, but maybe that's this person's breakup song. And then they start to tear up, right? My job as a clinician, I'm watching it. I want to keep everybody safe, and I don't want to trigger anybody. So I tell the kids all that. And I'm like, pick a song wisely, because I want to be able to play your song. I want to be able to share your song, and I want to talk about it with you, but I've got to do it this way. If I play Fuck the Police by NWA, and then you get discharged tomorrow, and you're driving down the hill with your mom, and you're like, hey, let's play this song that my clinician played in group. Pop. Your mom's going to go, make a U-turn and come back, right? And I'm going to get called in to talk to the director and try to explain why clinically I allowed this song to be played, right? Well, this is about the black man's plight in America and police brutality. Probably not. I don't want to have that conversation. So I tell the kids that, and then they will write down the songs. They'll put down their name in the songs, and then we'll go through and we'll play them. And we do one song at a time, and then we play the song, and then the song finishes, and I'll look at them and I'll ask them, tell me why you picked that song. Tell me what that did for you. Tell me, how do you feel right now? Do you feel different now than before you heard the song? Have you played the song before? What are your thoughts on this? And I get them to really kind of think about it, right? And then put it into words. And then, of course, I document that, because I want to show my treatment team, hey, this is something that we're doing and the kids are engaging. And then I tell the kids, okay, so you've learned today. And I don't think I've had a kid yet who told me that music doesn't work, and I've been there for 9 months, and I've dealt with a lot of kids. And I said, well, you've learned today that music can be something that helps you. It can be a positive coping skill, right? So how many of you guys have earbuds? Every hand. Who's got a cell phone? Every hand, right? Okay. So theoretically, you could be at home, you could become triggered, and you're upset, and you could go get your phone, plug in your earbuds, put on something, and try to help. And again, here comes the science: manage and regulate your emotions. And then going back to the CBT triangle, right? You've got the trigger that's at the top of the triangle, which quite often leads to an emotional response, which sometimes leads to a physical response, right? But if you're triggered, and right then in that moment before you get emotional, you go and you plug in some headphones and you listen to some music and you cool out, maybe you don't get emotional, and maybe you don't get physical, right?
Can you say a little bit about what CBT is for people who may not know in the triangle?
It's basically a way of kind of catching yourself in the moment. Like, again, when you're feeling triggered, being able to identify that and being aware of that, either because you've already identified what the triggers are, or you're kind of able to identify how your body's feeling when you're getting triggered. And in that moment, do something different, right? It's neuroplasticity. It's being able to, if you, what's an example? Let's say you smoke cigarettes, right? And let's say you started when you were 14, and now you're like a pack a day guy, right? And something happens, you light a cigarette. You get stressed out, you light a cigarette. Somebody cuts you off, you light a cigarette, right? And that's your thing. So using this model, and this is really crude, I apologize. But so let's say someone cuts you off, right? That's a trigger. And you're like, oh, I'm mad. Oh, let me light a cigarette, right? So those are the three things, right? But then you decide, you go to the doctor and they're like, yeah, you need to stop smoking today. And you're like, okay. And you're trying to figure out how you're going to do it. Well, I'm going to go to Costco, and I'm going to get the 80 pack of these nicotine gums, right? I have no idea if that's still a thing. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there, but let's say, right? And so now when I feel some kind of way and I get triggered, right? Instead of smoking, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that gum and pop it in my mouth, right? And I'm hoping that I can replace this negative behavior with a positive behavior. The other example that I give kids, I really like metaphors, is imagine I'm from LA, so everybody in LA hikes, right? And hiking out here is not like mountain climbing or rocks. It's like, you go on a it might be a little steep, and you get to the top, and oh, this is nice, and then you go get Starbucks, right? And so there's a lot of people that go hiking. It's very popular, even for people that aren't super athletic. I'm not super athletic, but I've been a bunch of times with friends, right? So let's say you go to a popular hiking spot. Let's say I'm in LA, you go to the Hollywood sign, right? And you want to go up to the top and you want to be able to see all of LA. And you get up there with your friends, you've never been, and then you get to the beginning of the hike and you can literally look at the hill and you could see the path, because hundreds and thousands of people have walked this path over and over. And it's created like, it's created like a, I don't know, rut. Is that what you would call it? In the ground, you see it, right? And you go with your friends and you walk on this path and you get up to the top and, oh, this is great. You take the selfie, right? And you're done for the day. And then you go eat, fat burgers or something. And then let's say you come back the next week by yourself. And as you're walking up, you look over here to the left and you see another hill and you're like, I wonder what the view would be like up there, but there's no path. And you're like, I think I'm going to find out. And you get off the beaten path, right? And you start going your own way, but there's no path. So what happens? You've got weeds and you've got grass, and maybe you hit a rock because you didn't see it. You kind of twist your ankle a little bit. Maybe you're walking and there's like a bush and it hits you in the face. And you're like, and you're dealing with this unbeaten path. And then you make it up to the top, right? And you get up to the top and you look around and you go, hey, this is pretty cool. And this is my private oasis. Nobody knows about this, just me. And then you come back down and you go home, and then you come back a week later and you're doing the regular path, and then you see it and you're like, I'm going to go on my path. You do it again. And you do it again. And you do it again, right? And then let's say you do it every weekend for a couple months. Well, what's going to happen is there starts to be a path, right? There starts to be an area where the grass is kind of beat down, and maybe one of those times when you were walking, you reached up, and instead of that branch hitting you in the face, maybe you reached up and you broke it. So now you don't have to deal with that, right? And maybe at some point, other people who you don't know who were walking on this path look over and say, hey, that looks cool. Why don't we try that? And they start doing it. You're in LA. So what's going to happen is within a very short amount of time, this is going to become a new path, and it becomes easier and easier, right? So I compare that to the neural pathways in your brain. So you have your brain, and then you've got a behavior that you do, like smoking cigarettes, right? So you get stressed out, you smoke your cigarette. So you've done that so many times that neural pathway is etched in stone, man. I mean, it's in there and you don't even have to think about it. Like you get stressed out, boom, cigarette, right? That's your default mode. But then when you're deciding, well, I don't want to smoke a cigarette anymore because of my health, I'm going to chew gum. The first time you chew gum, it's like that new path. And when you create that pathway in your brain, it's difficult. And it's like, imagine like a really solid magic marker line representing the neural pathway in your brain. And then over here, imagine just like a very light little dots with a pencil tip. And that's the first time you do it. And the second time, maybe there's a couple more dots. And the third time, maybe there's a couple more dots. But what happens with, I believe it's neuroplasticity, is the more times that you do this, then that pathway gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And if you're really lucky, and if you're able to stick to it, then maybe this becomes a new path and this becomes your default. Right. So with CBT, when you are at that triggering moment and you're able to maybe modify your behavior and change to listening to music or doing something positive instead of going into the emotions and feeling sad and maybe hurting yourself, you're rewiring your brain. Literally, you're rewiring your brain. And so I like to give metaphors and I like to explain it to kids because a lot of times adults just kind of talk to kids and they talk at kids and the kids feel that. And I don't do that, and I really pride myself on that. And I see them spark. I see the spark in their eyes when they're like, oh, I get it. And then when they listen to music, they're like, oh, I feel better. They kind of trip out like, oh, this is crazy, and they've learned something, and it's really amazing. And so, again, I'm still at the very, very, very beginning of my career. I've been working in social services for a long time. I've worked with kids for a long time, but I've only been a clinician for, really in this capacity for about 9 months.
Wow.
I'm getting ready to take my my license. I'm over my hours now, so I've got to study for this really scary test. It's like 177 questions in like 3 or 4 hours, and terrifying.
Are you worried about it?
I'm not. I'm not. I
No.
mean, I think I am like anybody is when you take a big test, but
Mm.
I'll study and I'll prep and I'll go online and I'll find whatever resources that I need to prepare myself for it. And I'm working in the field, so that helps. And I've got a
It sounds
pretty
like you're already doing amazing work, even after 9 months.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm so happy. And again, I'm able to kind of tie all the, it's so weird that I can tie all these things in. And I'll talk to my kids. I know that, we're supposed to have, kind of boundaries about what we share and what we don't share with kind of mental health professionals and stuff. But I'm a little loose with that. I still try to be mindful of it and careful, but I'm a little loose in as much as I want to share some of these experiences because I feel like it gives these kids some hope. And I feel like instead of me coming across like I'm another adult that knows everything and I've got all these degrees and blah, 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 I'm human. And I can be like, yeah, when I was a kid, this is what I did. I mean, I'm careful about what I share. I'm not like, oh yeah, we used to drink 40s and smoke weed, and I don't glorify that, but I'll allude that that I was a kid and did things like kids, and I didn't always think about what I was doing, and I try to use that to kind of inform my practice. And again, the wraparound stuff, 10 years of doing that's really, really at the base of my practice, and I love it. I mean, I feel really blessed to do it and working with these kids. It's amazing. I go to work excited. I have, again, in my algorithm, I have a bunch of different people that I follow, like life coaches and mental health people, a lot of my friends who are in this field, and they'll post stuff up. And sometimes I'll be like, I like that. Click, and I'll take a picture of it. And it might be, I don't know, just there was one the other day, and I wish I knew who it was so I can give them credit. And it showed a caterpillar, and it was a real crude drawing, right? It looked like a kid drew a caterpillar on this side and a butterfly on this side. And the caterpillar says, "What's it like?" And the butterfly says, "It's fucking amazing." And I was like, I like that. And I went to work. I didn't put the F word in there, but I drew as best I could. I just put that up on the wall and I left it alone. I walked away and the kids asked me about it. I'm like, what do you think it means? And so I get a lot, like I said, my algorithm's changing now, because the more you like those, the more they kind of pop up.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so again, I really feel like I'm just kind of grabbing stuff from everywhere and doing my best I really try to make sure that there is clinical evidence that it's scientific. I don't want to just go out there and present something and it's bullshit. I want to know that there's empirical data, that it's peer reviewed, that it's legitimate, or if it's been disproven, then maybe I'll say, well, maybe I'll take that out of my repertoire, But I've gotten really good responses from these kids and with these parents. And again, I really credit it to all my past jobs and different agencies that I worked for that kind of got me where I'm at now. And then even being a DJ, being a DJ, I'm pretty good at bantering. I'm pretty good at just being able to kind of talk to people. And again, the music was a huge piece, so yeah, man.
Well, speaking of social media, do you have any social media of your own that you want me to include in the
You
description or
can.
anything you want to
I have a
promote?
LinkedIn for like the mental health one, and that's my name. It's Carlos Peralta. That's P like Paul, ERALTA, and that's my LinkedIn. So that's kind of the official one. Facebook. I'm trying to think what I have it under. I think it's also under my name, Carlos Peralta, and that's more, like I said, I'm not out doing crazy stuff that I'm embarrassed about, but I'll put up like, again, I have residencies where I DJ at clubs or I open with bands and stuff. And I put stuff like that on there. And then every now and then I try to think it preachy, but if I see something that I think is cool and kind of inspirational, mental healthy, I'll share it, stuff like that. I share other friends of mine who are musicians and artists, if they're part of my circle of friends, if it's people that I believe in, that I share their stuff.
Did you ever get a DJ page or Mixcloud? Or...
Oh, okay. So at the beginning of COVID, after I arranged my room, I realized I had zero content on the internet, right? Zero, nothing. And I thought, well, that's not good. And so I decided that I wanted to, kind of create something. And so I started going live on Facebook, and I would go live and I would play records. And it was a little different because a lot of the DJs play laptops, computers, which I also do. But I would pull a record out of the sleeve and I would kind of go like this, so you can read the label, and I'd slap it down and I would mix them, and I would do sessions like that. And at one point I had 700 or 800 people following me every time I went live. I would kind of pump it up almost like a part of music marketing. I would make like a little flyer and like, hey, New Wave Wednesdays, 12 o'clock, or, Throwback Sundays. And I would list maybe whatever the genre was. And that went pretty well. But then Facebook really started cracking down because Facebook does not want to get sued by Sony.
Copyright.
Exactly. And so they started coming after, because all the DJs did that during COVID because there were no clubs. And they really kind of cracked down on it, and then they started kind of threatening, and they sending you letters and emails like, hey, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do, really scary stuff, you know. And so then I went over to Twitch, and I was doing that for a while, but then I think, or no, Instagram, and I think Facebook bought Instagram. Same thing happened. Then I went to Twitch, and then I went to Mixcloud, and everywhere I went, it's like they were following all the DJs, right? And the problem is, every time you go to another app, you lose people, because people that are following on Facebook, they don't want to go to this other thing. And if they go to this other thing and they got to log in, they're like, I don't know if this is a scam. I don't want somebody to hack my account, you know, and you just lose. And so it was a great social experiment that I got to do for a while. And I got to kind of put myself out there, and it was cool. And I probably went the first, I don't know, 6 months of COVID. And then finally I went over to Mixcloud. And so Mixcloud is interesting. Mixcloud is an app that you can get on your phone or your computer. And it was made for kids who are gamers. And so what they do is you log on, and let's say you follow somebody. Let's say you follow Gen X Jeff, right? And Jeff is, you go to his page, and there's one picture, and it's Jeff with the little headphones on, and he's got the controller. And then the other picture is his TV screen, and he's playing whatever game, some game. And Jeff, maybe you follow him, maybe he's got a Patreon or something, or some kind of way where you could subscribe, and he monetizes it. And basically they follow and they watch you, and then you teach them how to break levels, you know. And that's the whole premise, I believe, of the app. Well, DJs got on there, and they realized that that app did not have an algorithm that was checking for music. And so then DJs started kind of going on there, and they would do hour sets with their DJing, and they weren't getting shut down, they weren't getting muted, they weren't getting stopped, they weren't getting threatened. And so I started going on there, and currently I think I've got 60 mixes on there, and all my mixes are an hour, 2 hours long. And I'm an 80s baby, so that's really kind of what I play, which we're going to talk about. We're going to plug our next thing in a minute. And so I've got, like, when Eddie Van Halen died, I did a Van Halen glam rock Sunset Strip dedication tribute mix. And it was like AC/DC, Black Sabbath, Guns N' Roses, you know, all those dudes, you know. So I've got all these mixes in there in Mixcloud. So if people are into music, especially if you're like, I have everything, but if you really like 80s and 90s, my Mixcloud is DJ Carlito, Carlito, and then CAFE. Because my DJ name, my crew is called Café con Leche. And so if you go into your app store and you download Mixcloud, it's like a little purple thing. When you get in there, you could search, and then my thing pops up. And then feel free to follow, and, you know, you can comment, and, you know, there's a bunch of music. You can do that anytime you want. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be when it's live, when it's getting performed. You can just go in there, and then whenever I put a new one up, if you're following me, it'll pop up in your I don't know, your email, and it'll say that I just put a new one. Although I haven't done that in a minute because I've been working.
And I'll put all those links in the description of the video too, so people have them. You can just check below. And yes, you are coming back in June, and we're gonna do music, 80s
music
talk.
And we're gonna get deep, right? We're gonna get deep. I graduated in 87. I started DJing in 83. I'm all about it, and I love music. I love the videos. I love the culture. Again, that was really good times for me and Jeff. We've talked about it, kind of chopped it up, and so we're going to talk about that, right, at length. We're going to talk about that, and I'm looking forward to that one. You know, so
me too.
I'm looking at the clock, and it looks like it's kind of getting close. I know, Jeff, you've got some other stuff to
run. Yeah, I do have to wrap up. I can't tell you how excited and grateful I am that I was able to talk to you tonight. Thank you so much. I love the lights. I love the music. I love the work you do. I'm looking forward to our talk in June on the 80s.
Yeah, brother. Me too, man. Thank you. I so appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to kind of get out here. You know, I will tell. I'll give you guys a little teaser. I'm actually talking to some folks, some of my colleagues, and contemplating putting pen to paper, and maybe putting a book out. And that's all I can say right now about that, because it's very super duper early stages, but it's something I'm very excited about, and kind of in line with kind of what I'm doing, and just being able to kind of I don't know. I love my work, man. I love it. I'm excited every day when I go to work. I'm excited every day, and to be able to work with these kids, it's just a blessing. It's beyond any measure. You know, I can't even describe it.
Well, most of all, thank you for that, the work that you do.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for having me on here, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you too, and we'll talk.
All right.